The notification sound from my laptop cut through the silence of my home office at 2:47 a.m. Another automated reminder about quarterly tax filings. I stretched my back, feeling every one of my 44 years as I returned to the screen displaying our family's financial data. My name is Thomas Hartley, though most people just call me Tom, and for the better part of 2 decades, I've made my living as a forensic accountant, tracking down financial crimes that others thought were invisible. It's meticulous work, the kind that requires patience and an obsessive attention to detail that most people find mind-numbing. But numbers have always made sense to me in a way that people sometimes don't. Numbers don't lie, they don't make excuses, and they certainly don't betray you after 15 years of marriage. I rubbed my tired eyes and focused on the expense report I was preparing. Sarah's conference expenses for the past year were scattered across 17 different spreadsheets, each one requiring careful categorization for tax purposes. As the owner of a small forensic accounting firm that specialized in medical practices, I'd long ago taken over managing our household finances and Sarah's professional reimbursements. It was easier that way. She could focus on her research while I handled the paperwork that came with being a leading immunologist at one of Boston's most prestigious research hospitals. "Still awake?" Sarah's voice drifted from the doorway, soft but carrying that note of concern she used when she thought I was working too hard. Even at this ungodly hour, she looked put together in her silk pajamas, her auburn hair pulled back in the same practical ponytail she'd worn since our first date at a medical school mixer all those years ago. "Just organizing your conference receipts," I said, minimizing one spreadsheet to pull up another. "The university's new reimbursement system is a nightmare. They want everything coded differently now." She patted over in her bare feet and kissed the top of my head, her jasmine perfume, the same scent she'd worn at our wedding, enveloping me for a moment. "My hero," she murmured against my hair. "I don't know what I'd do without you handling all this. The thought of dealing with expense reports makes me want to quit academia entirely." "Well, we can't have that," I said, reaching up to squeeze her hand where it rested on my shoulder. "Not when you're so close to that big NIH grant." "Speaking of which," she said, stifling a yawn, "Marcus and I have an early morning session tomorrow to go over the statistical models. Well, today, technically. I should get back to bed." Dr. Marcus Webb. The name had become as familiar in our household as our own daughters' names over the past 3 years. A cardiovascular researcher who'd somehow become Sarah's most frequent collaborator, despite their fields having minimal overlap. But interdisciplinary research was all the rage now, especially for grant applications. "Don't forget Emma has her violin recital Thursday," I called after her as she headed back to our bedroom. "It's in my calendar," she replied. 7 p.m. sharp. I'll leave the lab early." After she left, I turned back to my screens, pulling up yet another expense report. That's when I noticed it, an anomaly in the patterns I'd been unconsciously tracking. Sarah's conference attendance had increased dramatically over the past 3 years. I created a new spreadsheet, labeling it Conference Analysis, and began doing what I did best, following the money. By the time the sun began creeping through my office blinds, I'd mapped out 47 conferences over 3 years. The major international symposiums made perfect sense. The International Immunology Summit, the European Congress of Immunology, the kinds of prestigious gatherings where careers were made. The national conferences were reasonable too for someone of Sarah's growing reputation. But then there were the others. 20 small regional conferences, some with fewer than 50 attendees. The Midwest Rural Immunology Symposium in Des Moines. The Northeast Cellular Response Workshop in Burlington, Vermont. The annual Maine Immunology Review, with its 37 registered attendees. I pulled up the attendance records, accessible through the university's portal since I handled reimbursements. Dr. Marcus Webb attended every single conference. All 47. My coffee had gone cold, but I didn't notice. I pulled up Marcus's CV from the hospital website. cardiovascular research with a specialty in statistical modeling, impressive credentials, Harvard Medical School, fellowships at Johns Hopkins. But why would a heart specialist attend advances in antibody therapy in Topeka, Kansas? What possible value could he derive from the rural Pennsylvania Immunology Collective with its 42 attendees? Dad? Olivia's voice startled me. My 12-year-old daughter stood in the doorway in her soccer uniform, ready for morning practice. Mom said to tell you breakfast is ready. Thanks, sweetie. I'll be right there. She lingered for a moment. You okay? You look weird. Just tired. Too much staring at numbers. That's why I'm never going to be an accountant, she declared, with the confidence only a 12-year-old could muster. No offense. None taken, I assured her, but my mind was already elsewhere, calculating probabilities and patterns. Breakfast was our usual controlled chaos. Emma, Olivia's twin, was practicing violin fingerings on the edge of the table while eating cereal one-handed. Olivia was demonstrating some new soccer move that apparently required kicking imaginary balls while seated. Sarah moved through it all with practiced efficiency, packing lunches, signing permission slips, and checking her phone every few seconds. Busy day? I asked, noting her distraction. Marcus found an issue with our dataset, she said without looking up from her phone. We might need to rerun some analyses. It could mean staying late tonight. On a Tuesday? She finally looked at me, and for a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Annoyance? Guilt? It was gone too quickly to identify. The grant deadline is in 2 weeks, Tom. This is crucial. Of course, I said mildly. I'll handle dinner with the girls. After Sarah left for the hospital and I'd dropped the twins at school, I returned to my home office and did something I'd never done in 15 years of marriage. I accessed Sarah's travel bookings through the university portal. She'd given me permission years ago, adding me as an authorized user to handle her reimbursements. It was routine, administrative access. But I'd never used it to spy on my wife before. I started with the most recent trip, the International Immunology Summit scheduled for next month in Chicago. Sarah had booked business class, seat 3A. I pulled up Marcus Webb's booking. Seat 3B, booked exactly 3 minutes after Sarah's. My hands were steady as I moved to the previous conference. Annual Conference on Molecular Medicine in San Diego, 2 months ago. Sarah in 14A, Marcus in 14B. Before that, the European Immunology Congress in Vienna. Business class with live flatbeds. Sarah in 2A, Marcus in 2B. I documented every booking, all 47 conferences. Not once were they seated apart. Not once did they book separately. Always adjoining seats, always together. The mathematical probability of this happening by chance was essentially zero. Then I pulled up the hotel records. This is where my expertise in forensic accounting became useful. The university had a policy of allowing double occupancy to save money. 2 researchers could share a room with separate beds. But Sarah's receipts showed she was charging for single occupancy while claiming double occupancy on her reimbursement forms. The difference over 3 years? Approximately $22,050. But that wasn't what made my chest tighten. It was the incidental charges. Room service for 2. Always for 2. Breakfast for 2 at the hotel restaurant. 2 wine glasses from the minibar. On New Year's Eve in Paris, during the European Winter Immunology Symposium, there was a charge for champagne service. The receipt specified 2 flutes. I sat back in my chair, staring at the evidence laid out in neat columns and rows. My wife was having an affair with Marcus Webb, and they were using academic conferences as their cover, funded by the university and ultimately by taxpayers through federal research grants. The sound of my business phone ringing pulled me from my spiral. It was a client, a medical practice suspected of Medicare fraud. I spent the next 3 hours focused on their case, grateful for the distraction. But my mind kept returning to those adjoining seats, those champagne flutes, those 47 conferences that had nothing to do with immunology and everything to do with immunity from suspicion. That evening, I watched my family at dinner with new eyes. Sarah talked animatedly about a breakthrough in her research, gesturing with her fork the way she did when she was excited about something. The twins bickered over who had to clear the table. Everything seemed normal, but I now knew it was a carefully constructed facade, like a balance sheet that looked clean until you knew which accounts to examine. "You're quiet tonight," Sarah observed as we cleaned up after dinner. The twins had disappeared to do homework, leaving us alone in the kitchen. "Just thinking about a case," I said, which was true enough. "Complex fraud situation. The perpetrators think they've covered their tracks with legitimate business operations." "Sounds complicated," she said, already moving toward her study. "I'm sure you'll figure it out. You always do. I've got to review some data before my call with Marcus." "Another late night?" She paused at the doorway. "The grant won't write itself. You understand, don't you? This is important." "Of course," I said. "I understand perfectly." Over the next 3 weeks, I became the lead investigator in the case of my own marriage. During the day, I maintained normal operations, client meetings, court testimonies, the usual work of a forensic accountant. But every spare moment was devoted to documenting Sarah and Marcus's deception. I discovered that their system was actually brilliant in its simplicity. Every paper they co-authored had just enough statistical modeling to justify Marcus's involvement. Every conference they attended together could be explained by their groundbreaking interdisciplinary collaboration. To the outside world, they were the perfect example of modern academic partnership, the kind that grant committees love to fund and journals love to publish. The text messages were harder to access, but not impossible. Sarah had forgotten that our family cloud backup included her phone data. I'd set it up years ago for security, and she'd never changed the settings. The messages started professionally enough. "Great presentation today. Your data on T-cell response was fascinating. Marcus, 3 years ago after a conference in Atlanta. Couldn't have done it without your statistical analysis." Sarah's response. "But over time, they evolved. Can't wait for Boston Immunology next month." Marcus. "Already counting the days." Sarah. "Did you see they upgraded us to a suite in San Francisco?" Marcus. "Perfect for reviewing our data." Sarah. "The emoji was what got me. Sarah never used emojis with me. Said they were unprofessional. The most recent messages were barely coded. Statistical significance achieved." Marcus, after Denver. "Best correlation coefficient ever." Sarah, after Seattle. "Can't wait to review our methodology again." Marcus. "The night before every trip, the timestamps told their own story. Messages at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., always during conferences. The kind of hours when legitimate colleagues would be asleep in their separate rooms, not texting about correlation coefficients. I created what would later be known as the most comprehensive documentation of an affair ever assembled in academic history. It was a 47-tab spreadsheet containing complete conference attendance records with cost analysis, flight bookings showing 3 years of adjoining seats, hotel charges analyzed to the penny, including minibar items, publication timelines showing papers submitted immediately after trips, expense report discrepancies totaling $73,000 in questionable charges, statistical analysis of their actual collaboration versus claimed work, text message frequency charts and sentiment analysis, metadata from shared documents showing editing patterns. The metadata was particularly damning. Most academic papers show steady progress over weeks or months, with regular editing sessions during business hours. But Sarah and Marcus's papers showed intense bursts of activity during conferences, often between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. One paper, supposedly about immunological markers in cardiovascular disease, was written entirely during the Hawaii Tropical Disease Conference. The topic had nothing to do with tropical diseases. As I compiled this evidence, I also researched the legal and professional implications. Travel fraud involving federal grant money wasn't just an ethical violation, it was a federal crime. The False Claims Act could result in criminal prosecution. At minimum, they would face termination, loss of medical licenses, and permanent exclusion from federal funding. But I wasn't interested in just destroying their careers. I wanted something more comprehensive, more poetic. I wanted their deception exposed in the most public, most humiliating way possible. The opportunity presented itself in the form of their NIH grant application. They'd been working on it for a year, a $2.8 million proposal to study novel immunological responses in cardiovascular disease. It was the perfect merger of their supposed expertise, the culmination of 3 years of collaboration. The deadline was in 2 weeks, and Sarah had been increasingly stressed about it. I knew Sarah's password system. She'd been using variations of the same base password since graduate school, her childhood dog's name plus the year. For the NIH portal, it would be Buddy 2024. She never knew that I knew this. It was the kind of small marital knowledge that seemed innocent until it wasn't. Late one night, while Sarah was asleep beside me, exhausted from another data review session with Marcus, I accessed their grant application. It was actually impressive. If they'd put as much effort into their actual research as they did into maintaining their affair, they might have made genuine scientific breakthroughs. I added an attachment to their submission. I titled it, Supplementary Documentation, Financial Analysis of Research Collaboration. Inside was my complete forensic analysis. Every flight, every hotel charge, every suspicious pattern, every piece of evidence that their collaboration was more personal than professional. I set it to submit automatically at 11:59 p.m. on the deadline day. Once submitted, NIH grants couldn't be withdrawn or modified. The reviewers would see everything, but that was just the opening move. The real devastation would come at the International Immunology Summit in Chicago. This was Sarah's moment. She would be presenting their research to 3,000 of the world's leading immunologists. It was a keynote presentation, the kind that could define a career. She'd been preparing for months, and the university had promoted it heavily. There would be media coverage, live streaming, the works. I booked myself on the same flight, though in economy while they flew first class. I also made a small preparation. Sarah's power bank, the one she religiously used to keep her devices charged during long travel days, had a twin that I purchased online. Same brand, same model, same weight, same scratches that I carefully replicated. The only difference? The replacement couldn't hold a charge. The morning of the flight, while Sarah showered, I swapped the power banks in her carry-on. She would board the plane with fully charged devices, but by the time she landed in Chicago, both her phone and laptop would be dead. She'd be disconnected from the world just long enough for the world to discover the truth about her. At Logan Airport, I positioned myself at a coffee shop with a clear view of their gate. They met there, maintaining professional distance but failing to hide the intimate familiarity in their body language. The way Marcus's hand ghosted over the small of her back as they moved through the boarding line. The way Sarah smiled at him, a genuine, unguarded smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. They boarded first class while I waited with the other economy passengers. As I shuffled onto the plane, I caught a glimpse of them in 3A and 3B, already deep in conversation, their heads close together as they reviewed something on Marcus's tablet. To anyone watching, they were just colleagues preparing for an important presentation. But I knew better. The flight was turbulent, which seemed appropriate. I spent it refining my plan, double-checking that every piece was in place. By the time we began our descent into O'Hare, I was ready. I took a different shuttle to a different hotel. No need to stay at the conference hotel. I'd be just another face in the crowd of 3,000 attendees. That evening, alone in my room, I ordered room service and reviewed my documentation one final time. At exactly 7 a.m., Chicago time the next morning, I would send the email that would destroy them. The recipient list had taken weeks to compile. It included every member of the immunology department at their hospital, the complete hospital board of directors, the grant review committee at NIH, the ethics board members, the editors-in-chief of every journal where they'd published together, the conference organizing committee, their department heads, their entire research teams, the dean of the medical school, selected science journalists who covered academic misconduct, roughly 300 of the most influential people in their professional sphere. The subject line was simple and professional. Financial irregularities in research funding, doctors. Sarah Hartley and Marcus Webb. The email itself was written in the dry, factual tone of a forensic accountant who discovered potential fraud. No emotion, no accusations of infidelity, just cold, hard data. I attached everything. The complete conference analysis, hotel receipts showing billing fraud, 3 years of adjoining seat assignments, and selected text messages that showed a clear progression from professional to personal. I also included a statistical analysis of their publications, demonstrating that Marcus's contributions were minimal, just enough to justify co-authorship and conference attendance. In 23 papers, his statistical modeling could have been done by any competent graduate student with basic R programming knowledge. It was academic padding at its finest. At 7 a.m. sharp, I hit send. Then I showered, dressed in my best conference-attending business casual, and made my way to the convention center. Sarah's presentation was scheduled for 9 a.m. in the main auditorium. I arrived at 8:30 and found a seat in the back row, just another anonymous attendee in a sea of researchers. The auditorium filled quickly. This was one of the summit's featured presentations, heavily promoted in all the conference materials. I recognized several prominent researchers in the crowd, including Dr. Patterson, the chief of medicine at Sarah's hospital, and Dr. Jennifer Liu, the summit director. Sarah took the stage at exactly 9 a.m. She looked confident, professional, radiant even, in her navy suit, the one I'd bought her for her birthday last year. Marcus sat in the front row, ready to join her for the statistical portion of the presentation. "Good morning, everyone," Sarah began, her voice clear and confident through the microphone. "Thank you for joining us today. My colleague Dr. Marcus Webb and I are excited to share our findings on novel immunological markers in cardiovascular disease." She clicked to her first slide, a beautiful graphic showing the intersection of immunology and cardiology. This work represents 3 years of intensive collaboration, and we believe it will fundamentally change how we approach cardiovascular treatment. 10 minutes into her presentation, I saw the first ripple. Dr. Patterson, sitting in the third row, glanced at his phone. His face went white, then red. He nudged his colleague, showed him the screen. The colleague's eyes widened, and he immediately pulled out his own phone. The ripple spread like a wave through the auditorium. Phones were discreetly checked, hushed whispers exchanged, shocked looks shared. Sarah, deep in her presentation flow, didn't notice at first. She was explaining their methodology, clicking through slides with practiced ease. But Marcus noticed. His phone, which he'd forgotten to silence, began buzzing insistently on his lap. He glanced at it, and I watched the blood drain from his face. He looked up at Sarah, then back at his phone, then started typing frantically. Sarah was in the middle of explaining their T-cell analysis when she noticed the disturbance. Half the audience was now looking at their phones instead of her presentation. She paused, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. Is everything all right?" she asked. That's when Dr. Jennifer Liu stood up from her seat in the front row and walked purposefully toward the stage. The summit director's face was grim as she climbed the steps to the podium. The conversation was picked up by Sarah's microphone. "Dr. Hartley," Dr. Liu said quietly, though her words echoed through the auditorium. "I need to speak with you immediately." "I'm in the middle of my presentation," Sarah said, confusion evident in her voice. "I'm afraid there's been a serious allegation that requires immediate attention," Dr. Liu said. She leaned closer and whispered something in Sarah's ear. The transformation was instantaneous and devastating. Sarah's professional composure shattered completely. Her face went white, then flushed deep red. Her hands began shaking. She looked out at the audience, 3,000 of the world's leading immunologists, all now staring at her with a mixture of shock, curiosity, and in some cases barely concealed schadenfreude. I need to..." Sarah stammered into the microphone, her voice breaking. She looked at Marcus, who was already standing, already moving toward the exit, abandoning her on stage. "Marcus," she called out, forgetting the microphone was still on. "Marcus, wait!" She ran after him, leaving Dr. Liu alone on stage, leaving her presentation half-finished, leaving her career in ruins. The auditorium erupted in chaos. 3,000 researchers all talking at once, all checking their phones, all forwarding the email to colleagues who hadn't received it. Within minutes, the Hartley Web scandal was trending on academic Twitter. I slipped out during the chaos and went to a nearby restaurant for an early lunch. My phone buzzed constantly. Colleagues who knew I was Sarah's husband, checking if I was okay, if I knew, if it was true. I ignored them all and enjoyed my sandwich and coffee while scrolling through the rapidly exploding academic social media response. The institutional response was swift and ruthless. By noon, the hospital had convened an emergency ethics board meeting via video conference. Someone live-tweeted the public portion. Breaking: Boston Medical Research Hospital suspends Dr. Sarah Hartley and Dr. Marcus Webb pending investigation into federal grant fraud allegations. Update: NIH confirms all Hartley Webb grants frozen immediately. Criminal investigation possible. Developing: 23 joint publications flagged for review. Journal editors calling for emergency editorial board meetings. The question on everyone's lips: was any of their research real? Or was it all an elaborate excuse to conduct an affair on the taxpayer's dime? By evening, the story had escaped academic Twitter and hit mainstream media. Scandal at medical conference. Prominent researchers accused of grant fraud for secret affair ran on several news sites. Someone had recorded Sarah running off stage, and the video was everywhere. I waited in the lobby of their hotel that evening. Not to confront, but to deliver the paperwork. I'd moved hotels after the morning's drama, checking into the conference hotel under the assumption Sarah would need to retrieve her belongings. She arrived at 9:47 p.m. looking destroyed. Her perfect conference outfit was wrinkled. Her hair escaped from its usual pristine ponytail, her makeup smeared from crying. She saw me immediately. I'd chosen my position carefully, in a wingback chair with clear sightlines to all entrances. "Tom." Her voice was barely a whisper. She approached slowly, like someone approaching a wild animal or a judge for sentencing. I stood and picked up 2 folders from the side table. "These are for you." She took them with trembling hands. The first folder contained divorce papers, already filed with Suffolk County Court. Massachusetts allows for at-fault divorce on grounds of adultery, and I had documentation that would make our case a textbook example for law students. "You filed already?" she asked, her voice breaking. "This morning, before your presentation. The process server will officially serve you when you return to Boston, but I thought you should know now." She opened the second folder and gasped. It was thick with documents, termination letters from the hospital, demand for repayment of $73,000 in fraudulent travel expenses, notice of investigation from the Office of Research Integrity, a letter from NIH stating all pending grants were suspended indefinitely, and a formal notice that she was now under federal investigation for grant fraud. How did you get these? I've been forwarding your mail to a P.O. box since last week, I said simply. You'll need to update your address with everyone. I'd suggest getting a lawyer first, though. A criminal defense attorney, specifically. Tom, please, let me explain. Explain what exactly? I interrupted, my voice calm but cold. The 47 conferences where you sat in adjoining seats? The $73,000 in fraudulent expenses? The hotel rooms you claimed were double occupancy while booking singles and pocketing the difference? Or should we discuss the statistical significance you achieved with Marcus at 2 a.m. in Vienna? She flinched at the quote from their text messages. You read our messages? Our family cloud backup, Sarah. You never changed the settings. I've been reading them for 3 weeks. Best correlation coefficient ever? Really? Is that what you're calling it now? The girls, she started, tears streaming down her face. The twins are with my mother in Vermont, I said. I told them you had an important conference and would be gone for a while. They're handling it better than expected. Although Olivia did ask if she could have your home office for her art projects. You can't just take them. I can, and I have. Given that you're about to be unemployed and possibly facing federal charges, I doubt any court will find you the more suitable parent. Your belongings are in Storage Unit 447 at Boston Self-Storage on Memorial Drive. The key is at the front desk. The unit is paid through the end of the month. After that, it's your responsibility. I turned to leave, then stopped. Oh, one more thing. The trust funds I set up for Emma and Olivia's college education, those are now in my sole control. The paperwork was filed yesterday. Your collaboration cost them Harvard, but I'm sure community college will provide adequate opportunities. Unless, of course, you can explain to them why Mommy committed federal crimes for adjoining airline seats. Her face crumpled completely. Tom, I love you. It wasn't supposed to… To what? To destroy our family? To cost you your career? To become a case study in research misconduct? What exactly wasn't it supposed to do, Sarah? I was lonely, she said quietly. You were always working, always buried in your spreadsheets. Marcus understood my research, understood the pressure, and I understood our mortgage, our daughter's futures, our life together, I interrupted. But apparently that wasn't as exciting as room service for 2 in Vienna. It wasn't just about the conference in Des Moines, I said, cutting her off. The Midwest Rural Immunology Symposium. 37 attendees. Marcus is a cardiovascular researcher. What possible legitimate reason did he have for attending? What groundbreaking interdisciplinary insights were gained from that particular gathering? She had no answer. The NIH grant, I continued. The one you've been working on for a year? The one that was going to establish you as a leader in the field? Check your submission. Check the attachments. I added my complete forensic analysis to your application. It was submitted at 11:59 p.m. on the deadline. Can't be withdrawn now. Every reviewer will see exactly how you and Marcus spent your research time. The color drained from her face completely. You didn't. I did. I'm a forensic accountant, Sarah. When I find fraud, I report it, even when it's in my own home. I left her standing there in the lobby, still holding the folders, and went up to my room. Through my window, I could see the conference center across the street, still bustling with evening sessions. Tomorrow, every attendee would know the full story. The academic gossip network was more efficient than any news service. The next morning, I flew home alone. Sarah and Marcus were presumably dealing with the immediate fallout. Emergency meetings with lawyers, frantic calls to colleagues, desperate attempts at damage control that were doomed to fail. The internet never forgets, and academic Twitter certainly never forgives. Back in Boston, I enacted the next phase. I'd spent 3 weeks analyzing metadata from their research documents. Most academic papers go through dozens of drafts, with timestamps showing steady work over weeks or months. Sarah and Marcus's papers showed a different pattern entirely. Intense bursts of activity during conferences, often between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. One paper was written entirely during the Hawaii Tropical Disease Conference, despite containing zero tropical disease research. I compiled this analysis into a report titled Temporal Patterns in Academic Publishing, a Case Study in Research Misconduct. I submitted it to the Journal of Academic Ethics, which fast-tracked it for publication. The editor called me personally. "Mr. Hartley, this is unprecedented. Are you sure you want to publish this? It involves your wife." "Ex-wife," I corrected. "And yes, I'm sure. Academic integrity matters." The paper would become one of their most cited publications, though I took no pleasure in that particular irony. The Office of Research Integrity opened a formal investigation within days. When federal money is involved, the government takes fraud very seriously. Sarah and Marcus were looking at potential criminal charges, not just professional disgrace. The FBI actually sent agents to interview me. "Mr. Hartley," the lead agent said, sitting in my living room with his partner. "What you've documented here is extensive. How long have you been gathering this evidence?" "3 weeks since I discovered the affair," I said. "But the financial irregularities go back 3 years. I just needed to know where to look." "And you're willing to testify if this goes to trial?" "Absolutely." Marcus's wife, Patricia, was also a researcher at the hospital, a neurologist with an impeccable reputation. She learned about the affair during her own presentation at a neurology conference in Seattle. Someone in the audience, having just read my email, asked her, "Dr. Webb, what's your response to your husband's alleged misconduct with Dr. Hartley?" She maintained her composure long enough to finish her presentation, then filed for divorce from her hotel room. By the time Marcus returned to Boston, the locks on their house had been changed, his belongings were in storage, and Patricia had already retained one of the city's most ruthless divorce attorneys. The professional collapse was swift and comprehensive. Every researcher who'd cited their papers panicked, wondering if their own work was now tainted. Graduate students abandoned their labs, not wanting their careers associated with the scandal. Speaking invitations were rescinded globally. Pharmaceutical companies pulled consulting contracts. The Hartley-Webb scandal became a cautionary tale told at ethics training sessions worldwide. I got a call from Lindsay, a researcher who'd been offered Sarah's position at the hospital. "Mr. Hartley, I'm calling to ask about some equipment in Dr. Hartley's former laboratory. We're not sure what belongs to her personally versus the hospital." "Everything in that lab was purchased with grant money," I said. "It all belongs to the institution. Sarah owns nothing there except maybe some personal photos in her desk drawer." "There are no personal photos," Lindsay said quietly. "Just research papers and conference programs." That hurt more than I expected it to. Within 6 months, the full scale of the damage became clear. The IRS, alerted to fraudulent travel deductions, launched an audit. Both Sarah and Marcus owed back taxes plus penalties exceeding $50,000 each. Their retirement accounts were frozen pending the federal investigation. The hospital successfully clawed back the $73,000 in fraudulent expenses through legal action. Neither could find positions at any reputable research institution. Their names were toxic in academic circles. Sarah eventually found work at an urgent care clinic in Nebraska. $47,000 a year, no research, no conferences, just treating sore throats and sprained ankles for walk-in patients. She lived in a studio apartment, sending me $2,000 a month in alimony and child support that barely covered her rent after the payment. Her LinkedIn profile listed her as an independent researcher, a face-saving fiction that fooled no one in the academic community. Marcus fared slightly better initially, securing a position teaching pre-med students at a community college in Arizona. But even that didn't last. A group of students discovered the scandal online and started a petition to have him removed. The administration, fearing bad publicity, didn't renew his contract. Last I heard, he was teaching online courses for a for-profit medical school based in the Caribbean, the kind that accepts anyone who can pay tuition. His wife, Patricia, meanwhile, thrived. She took over Marcus's research grants, the ones not connected to Sarah, published a groundbreaking paper on neurological responses to cardiac events, ironically related to Marcus's supposed field, and was promoted to department head. She remarried 2 years later to a surgeon who, as she pointedly mentioned in interviews, has no interest in collaborative research. I threw myself into my work, but with a new specialty. Universities and research institutions began hiring me to audit their grant systems, looking for the kind of fraud Sarah and Marcus had perpetrated. I became the go-to expert on academic financial misconduct, turning my personal catastrophe into professional expertise. Following the money in academia, a forensic approach to research fraud became required reading in graduate programs nationwide. The book featured the Hartley Webb case as its centerpiece, though I changed the names out of a last vestige of respect for what we once had. I donated the royalties to a scholarship fund for students from single-parent families, knowing my daughters would soon qualify. The twins adjusted better than I'd expected. Children are resilient, and at 12 they were old enough to understand that their mother had made choices that had consequences. Emma threw herself into violin with new intensity, as if she could play away the pain. She earned first chair in the youth orchestra within 6 months. Olivia channeled her anger into soccer, becoming the most aggressive midfielder her coach had ever seen. She plays like she's got something to prove, the coach told me after a particularly intense game. She does, I said simply. They visited Sarah monthly, awkward weekends in Nebraska that grew more strained over time. Sarah tried to parent through guilt and gifts she couldn't afford. Designer clothes bought on credit, the latest phones that would be repossessed 2 months later when she couldn't make the payments. "Why does Mom live in such a crappy apartment?" Olivia asked after one visit. "Because she made choices that affected her career," I said carefully. "You mean because she cheated on you with that Marcus guy and they stole money?" Emma said bluntly. I looked at my 12-year-old daughter, surprised by her directness. "How do you know about that?" "Mom's name is all over the internet, Dad. Kids at school showed us the video of her running off stage. It has like 3 million views on YouTube." I hadn't known about the video going viral. "I'm sorry you had to see that." "Tyler Morrison's mom said Mom is a cautionary tale," Olivia added. "What does that mean?" "It means she's an example of what not to do," Emma answered before I could. "Right, Dad?" "Something like that," I said, heartbreaking for my daughters who had to carry their mother's shame to middle school every day. A year after the scandal, I met Lindsay again, this time at a forensic accounting conference where I was presenting on academic fraud detection. She attended my talk, sitting in the front row taking careful notes. "That was brilliant," she said afterward. "Though I have to say, I'm glad I'm just a regular researcher with no interest in collaboration." "All collaboration?" I asked, surprised by my own boldness. She smiled. "Well, maybe some kinds. Would you like to get coffee and discuss it?" Coffee turned into dinner, dinner turned into weekly dates, and within 6 months, Lindsay had met the twins. She was different from Sarah in every way. An artist who painted in addition to her research, someone who found joy in solitude rather than conferences, who collaborated only with canvas and microscope. "I Googled you," she admitted on our 5th date. "The whole scandal. Your ex-wife really destroyed everything for some conference hookups?" 47 conferences worth, I said. Though I don't think they saw it that way. They probably thought they were in love. "Love doesn't require adjacent airline seats and fraudulent expense reports," Lindsay said firmly. Love shows up at violin recitals and soccer games. Love is honest. The twins loved Lindsay immediately. She taught Emma advanced fingering techniques for violin. She'd played professionally in college before switching to science, and coached Olivia on headers. She brought color back into our house, literally and figuratively, hanging her paintings on walls that had been bare since Sarah left. Is Lindsay going to be our new mom? Olivia asked one evening about a year into our relationship. Sarah is still your mom, I said carefully. Lindsay is… Lindsay. Good, Emma said. We like Lindsay better anyway. We married 2 years after the divorce was finalized. A small ceremony with just family and close friends. No conferences involved, no co-authors, no collaborative research. Just two people promising to be honest with each other. A radical proposition in its simplicity. The wedding was in our backyard, the twins as bridesmaids, Lindsay's parents flying in from California. Sarah wasn't invited, but she sent a card that arrived the day before. Best wishes on your new beginning. I threw it away unopened. The permanent record of Sarah and Marcus's disgrace lives in multiple databases now. The Federal Database of Research Misconduct, the NIH's excluded parties list, the hospital's public disciplinary records. Their case study is taught in ethics courses globally, usually under the title The Hartley Webb Affair, a cautionary tale of academic misconduct. The photo from Sarah's aborted presentation, her face at the moment of realization, became an internet meme briefly. That moment when you realize your side piece cost you everything was the most popular caption. The twins saw it, of course. Kids see everything on the internet. Mom's famous, Olivia said sarcastically when she showed me the meme on her phone. Infamous, Emma corrected. There's a difference. Sarah's last legitimate paper, published just before the scandal broke, was titled Trust Markers in Collaborative Research. It explored how research partnerships build and maintain trust through transparency and communication. It's now required reading in many ethics courses, though not for the reasons Sarah intended. The irony is so heavy it could sink a ship. I had it framed and hung in my office, adding my own subtitle in small print. A retrospective analysis. Lindsay saw it and raised an eyebrow. That's petty, she observed. Probably, I admitted. But I'm a forensic accountant. I believe in maintaining accurate records. And poetic justice. That too. 5 years have now passed since that morning in Chicago when 3,000 immunologists watched my marriage end in real time. The twins are 17, preparing for college. Emma got into Juilliard for violin performance. Olivia has a full soccer scholarship to Duke. The trust funds I protected paid for all their application fees, SAT prep, and will cover whatever scholarships don't. Sarah still sends birthday cards and holiday gifts, trying to maintain some connection to the daughters whose lives she imploded for the sake of adjoining airline seats and hotel room service. The gifts are always either too expensive, when she's behind on support payments, or disappointingly generic, gift cards to stores the twins never shop at. Mom sent me $50 for Starbucks, Emma told me, on her last birthday. She spelled my name wrong on the card. She was probably distracted, I said, trying to be charitable. For 5 years, Emma replied. Marcus disappeared entirely from our lives after the scandal. He moved to Singapore to teach at what he described in increasingly desperate LinkedIn posts as an emerging research institution. But what was actually a for-profit medical school that accepted anyone who could pay the $80,000 annual tuition. His wife Patricia remarried, a surgeon with zero interest in collaborative research who actually attended their children's school events. The hospital where Sarah and Marcus worked implemented new policies in the wake of the scandal. They now require detailed justification for all collaborative travel, random audits of co-authored papers, and separate booking of all travel arrangements. They call it the Hartley Webb Protocol, a permanent reminder etched into institutional policy. Sometimes I wonder if Sarah ever thinks about the moment it all fell apart. Does she replay that conference presentation, wondering if she could have handled it differently? Does she remember the 47 conferences, the adjoining seats, the late-night statistical modeling sessions, and wonder if they were worth losing everything? I asked her once, during a tense exchange about the twins' college plans. Do you regret it? I said over the phone, after discussing payment schedules for application fees. There was a long pause. Every day, she finally said. But not for the reasons you think. What reasons then? I regret getting caught, she said quietly. I regret the way it happened. But those 3 years with Marcus, they were the most alive I'd felt in a decade. More alive than our daughter's births, our wedding, building our life together. You wouldn't understand, she said. You've always been satisfied with spreadsheets and predictability. Some of us need more. And now you have less, I pointed out. Was it worth it? She hung up instead of answering. The twins graduated high school last month. Sarah attended, sitting in a different section, watching daughters she barely knew anymore achieve things she'd never be part of. She looked older, grayer, diminished in some fundamental way. The confident researcher who once commanded conference stages was gone, replaced by someone who'd learned that collaborative research could cost more than any grant could ever fund. After the ceremony, in the chaos of families taking photos, Sarah approached us. "Congratulations, girls," she said awkwardly. "I'm so proud of you both." "Thanks," Emma said politely, already turning back to her friends. "Yeah, thanks," Olivia added, equally distant. Sarah looked at me, seeking something. Sympathy, maybe, or understanding. I offered neither. "The checks for their college deposits need to clear by July 1st, I said instead. "Don't be late." She nodded and walked away, alone, to her rental car with the Nebraska plates. The twins didn't watch her go. That evening, at the graduation party Lindsay and I threw, the house was full of friends, family, laughter. Emma played violin for the guests, Olivia showed off her soccer trophies, and Lindsay's paintings provided a colorful backdrop to our celebration. No one mentioned Sarah. It was as if she'd never existed, edited out of our family story like a typo in an otherwise perfect document. "No regrets?" Lindsay asked me later that night, after the guests had gone home and the twins were asleep. "About Sarah? None." "About how you handled it?" I thought about it for a moment. I could have confronted her privately, could have handled it quietly, divorced amicably, kept it out of the public eye. But she stole $73,000. She committed federal fraud. She destroyed our family for conference hotel rooms. She deserved what she got. And the girls? Did they deserve to see their mother humiliated on that scale? It was a fair question, one I'd wrestled with many times. They deserved a mother who put them first. Since she couldn't give them that, at least they got to see that actions have consequences. That's a valuable lesson too. Lindsay curled into me on the couch, her head on my shoulder. "You're a hard man, Tom Hartley." "I'm a forensic accountant," I said. "I follow the money and report the truth. Even when it hurts." "Especially when it hurts?" "Especially then." The last document in my Hartley web file is a printout of an email Sarah sent me last week. "She's getting married," she wrote, "to a doctor she met at the urgent care clinic, a general practitioner with no research interests, no conference attendance, no collaborative opportunities. She wanted me to know so I could prepare the girls." I showed it to Emma and Olivia over breakfast. "Mom's getting married," I said simply. They exchanged glances. "Okay," Emma said. "Do we have to go to the wedding?" Olivia asked. "Only if you want to." "Pass," they said in unison. And that was that. 15 years of marriage, 2 children, a life built together, reduced to a pass from the daughters she'd sacrificed for adjacent airline seats. I filed the email in the folder with all the other documentation. Someday, when the twins are older, they might want to understand the full story of what happened to their family. The evidence will be there, meticulously organized, every receipt cataloged, every pattern documented. It's what I do. I maintain accurate records. But for now, we move forward. Emma leaves for Juilliard in the fall, Olivia for Duke. Lindsay and I are planning to travel, actual vacations, not conferences. We joke about booking non-adjacent seats just to prove a point, though we never actually do it. The forensic accounting of my marriage is complete, every transaction documented, every deception exposed. The books are balanced now, the audit closed. Sarah and Marcus paid the price for their fraud. Careers destroyed, reputations ruined, families shattered. They're cautionary tales now, warning signs for other academics who might be tempted to blur the lines between professional and personal. And me? I'm the man who exposed them, who turned personal betrayal into professional expertise, who chose truth over comfortable lies. Some might call it revenge. I call it justice. The numbers never lie, even when the people we love do. The sun sets over Boston as I close my laptop, the Hartley web file finally complete. Downstairs, I can hear Lindsay painting in her studio, the twins video chatting with friends about college plans. This is my family now, built on honesty rather than conference schedules, strengthened by truth rather than statistical modeling. It's not the life I planned when I married Sarah all those years ago, but it's real, it's honest, and every receipt checks out. For a forensic accountant, that's everything. The very last item in my file is a photo from Emma's graduation. Lindsay and I flanking the twins, all of us smiling genuinely. In the background, barely visible, is a blurred figure in the distance, Sarah walking alone to her car. It's the perfect metaphor for how our story ended. She's still there, technically, but out of focus, irrelevant to the sharp, clear picture of our rebuilt family. I close the file for the last time. The case is closed. The evidence has been presented. The verdict rendered. Sarah chose Marcus and 47 conferences. I chose truth and our daughters. In the end, the math is simple. She lost everything that mattered for something that didn't last. I lost a dishonest wife and gained an honest life. The numbers, as always, tell the whole story.